And me.
Just 1 second.
Do you have to
No.
Are we good? Are we back? Okay, we're good. That's fine. We're just gonna have to. Yay!
We got a chat room going, so it's as close as we're going to get right now. And it seems like we've got people online who are putting out fires like,
Tell them we're really sorry.
Sound from the stage is not good.
I know.
I guess to
Oh, there we go.
Can they hear through the? Can they hear us talking through the mic?
Do we have audio online? Are we ready to go?
Hang on.
Okay.
A couple of housekeeping things for people in the audience. Probably
Here, I'll talk.
for the next session, we're going to do like we did yesterday. Instead of Aaron and I showing the demo like we did that first day, you're going to go back to your rooms that you did, beginning or advanced. So make sure you go back to that same room.
How clear is
and
it on
get
stage?
some more help on how to build.
Well, you can just ask them since they can hear you.
So we're going to continue that process.
That's why I'm
Also,
talking.
if you are planning to do the whole credit thing, Jerry is still in charge of credit, wherever Jerry is. He's out front. So
I know you can hear me.
Another thing that's happening right now that we don't have on the slideshow at all, but we want to make a short video, and Deb is going to be coming around with a video camera. We would love just to have little snippets of some of you chatting about how you plan to use the concept of the flipped class in your setting with your kids. We want to show that then this afternoon during the closing. And so she is going to be around with the video camera. So
We also just wanted to remind everyone that in 217 and 218, Camtasia workrooms. So if you've been to all the sessions that you want to go to, and you just want some time to work, some of us have been in and out in those rooms. Dave and Troy have been in and out of those rooms with TechSmith. So if you have just kind of practical questions, if you have Camtasia type questions, and you just want some time to play, make videos, then please, by all means, do that. It's a good place to kind of get everything set up, make sure you have all the correct boxes checked, configured, things that you only have to do once to get Camtasia up and running, and then from there on out, you're a rock star and you're just making videos.
and a couple of, or one change in the actual schedule. Okay, Phil, raise your hand, Phil. Phil is going to switch, we're switching, I forget which room. Can you just, why don't you address that?
The library presentation this morning, instead of doing the Moodle question banks presentation, I'll be doing the measurement and assessment one. So if you're interested in the measurement and assessment one, it wasn't going to be this afternoon. It's going to be this morning, and the one on Moodle will be this afternoon. Also, in case you're interested in Moodle and not necessarily Camtasia, I'll be hanging out in the comments section over here. So if you want to come talk about Moodle more, see some more, ask some questions about it, I'll be up there for those interested in Moodle.
So Phil is the resident Moodle expert, so if you need help on Moodle, he's the guy. So if you just, we want you to get out of this conference what you want to get out of it. So if you just want to work on Moodle, you get the whole video game. You don't want to do the video game, whatever, go see Phil. So, yeah. Are we good up in the box?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we just want to just open it up. It's just a Q&A time. We want you to ask questions. We want the online people to ask questions. What questions do you have for our presenters? So, yeah, we'll start right here.
Question about the grading, because with your kids, so they do the problem set of the worksheet, check out the emails, and then you follow the sessions, and to me, it seems that some of the sessions are in my case, how do you fit in all the stuff that they do, or maybe don't do, but then maybe very over time?
Okay, so the question is about formative assessment and summative assessment. Partly, I kind of working with the mastery model that John and I have been using, and the comment was if the summative assessment, if they get it there, why do we give them points or a score for formative assessment? That's a very good question. So currently what John and I have kind of figured out is we have 50% of their grade is kind of this weekly progress grade, if you chatted with us at all, and then 50% of the grade is their summative unit exams. It's not the best system, frankly. It's kind of what has worked for us. It's what our community understands. It's what our students understand. It kind of fits within the grading model of what we have here at Woodland Park High School. but it's not perfect. Now, here's a few ways I've kind of dealt with that. If there's a student who just gets it, they're like, I don't need to do your assignments, I don't need to watch your videos, I don't need to do anything, except those required labs that you make me do. I get it. Why do I have to do all this stuff? And they can pass my summative assessment on the unit exam. What I'll do is I will go back and I will give them credit for having mastered those objectives in my formative grading portion. If they can go straight to summative, I will backfill, if you will, the formative grade portion of it. They don't have to do that because they have demonstrated to me on the summative side that they get it. So that's something I do, and I deal with that on an individual basis with the students, but I don't fill in the required elements. So like if there's a required lab, they don't get credit for the required lab because I still want them to have that lab experience. Does that kind of answer your question? Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Hey, there's mics behind you. Yeah, great.
In Sioux Falls, what we have decided to do is we have an end of the semester district exam that about 1,200 chemistry students around the district take. And that's our personal high stakes test, and we want our students to do very well on that. And so what we do is we do the formative quizzes along the way where we require mastery, and the students have to get the 80% to move along. But then at the end, when they take that unit exam, they get the score they get. There's not a second chance. And the reason we went that route was because we assume, and we think that this is a valid assumption, if they have mastered the content along the way, then when they get to that summative exam, they should be able to demonstrate that mastery, their understanding. And we did that for two reasons. Number one, because we want them to retain that content. And number two, because that's what high stakes tests are all about. You know, you don't get that second chance. So we wanted to model both, that we want you to learn the content along the way, and we're going to give you lots of chances to do that, we're not penalizing you as you're learning it. But then at some point, you need to prove that you can retain that content. But they still have to take that, the question, okay, go ahead. The question was, what about the student that doesn't take those quizzes along the way? We don't really give them the option of not taking that quiz. You know, if I see that they've moved on to lab 2 and they haven't taken quiz 1, I'm gonna find them. And so, yeah, I don't really give them the opportunity to not take that quiz somewhere along the way. I'm a little bit more like John in the, teaching by harassment, that I just bother them a lot.
I'd like to add something to that too. I tend to be of the same philosophy. If mastery is what matters, then why give grades for other sort of things? In fact, my grade book last year only had quizzes and exams in it. That was it. And there was no credit given for the warm-ups. There was no credit for the assignments, no nothing. Based on philosophy, you don't get credit for showing up and trying. You get credit for actually accomplishing the goal, is what you're after. But in dealing with the 11 to 13-year-old mind that's been indoctrinated in a completely different system for the previous 6 school years of their life, there was a lot of resistance and misunderstanding of that. And I did not have that many people that really did know the material and could skip the work and pass the assessments, but a lot of them tried and wanted to do that. So next year, I am afraid I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and I am going to offer us a very tiny amount of credits for actually doing the work, because I believe that doing the work is important. And I don't want them to skip it because, why should I do it? Because it's not worth anything, which unfortunately is the attitude that we have in a lot of students these days. So I think you have to strike a balance between those two things. But mastery is the goal. And maybe somewhere down the line, in elementary school, they're not trained, to play school, then we can get away from it, from that particular model.
I think the way we're going to work this out might be more efficient. I'm going to be the roving mic guy, so if you have a question, Aaron's going to point, I know somebody around here, and I will just bring the mic. That way the online audience can hear the question. And of course we can hear the online questions because Sarah will repeat them. So over here.
What is the best method of educating parents about the new model that you're instituting?
I think, you know, anytime you have a what is the best method question, it's hard to answer just because there is no one way to do that. Living in Korea for the last 2 years, again, the culture there is very, very, what assignment do I have to do? What do I have to know to get 100 on the test? So when I introduced this, parents just didn't understand it, and kids didn't understand it because I was taking it all from what they had been doing for the last 10 or 11 years and moving it totally to the opposite side of the spectrum. The best way that I found, you know, of course I sent home this gigantic parent letter. Our open house is about 2 weeks after the start of school, and we had about a week with the students where I explained it to them. I sent another letter home with them, and I required the parents to sign the slip on the end of that letter. And what I found was that most parents signed the slip, but then almost all the parents came to my open house because they were curious. And so I had 200 people, you know, coming through my room in one night. It was just crazy. But the conversations that I got to have with those parents and the word of mouth that happened, because if the parent couldn't make it to open house, they ended up calling me directly and saying, so what's going on? And a lot of these parents who were very, very nervous about it at the beginning would end up calling later during the year and saying, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for what you've done. So it was a lot of the word of mouth that helped it the most, and the discussions that came up out of it. But it starts with being proactive and writing a letter and saying, this is what I'm doing, and then requiring the kid to sit down with mom and dad or whoever's at home, read it, sign it, we understand, and that way there's still some accountability. So when they come in at the end of the year and say, you know, this was terrible, I didn't know about this until later. I said, well, you signed the slip, you know. You know, it's just the accountability portion of it, but most of the experiences that I had were very positive in that direction. So.
We used, one of the advantages of using the Web 2.0 tools is that it was very transparent to our parents. If a parent wanted to see what we were doing, I just gave them the link to what we were doing, so they could not only see what their child was doing, but they could see what the other children in the class were doing. And so if they were like, why is my child not doing as well as somebody else, or you know, something along those lines, here it is. You compare and you tell me if you think that your child is doing as well as another child, or if you think it's doing too much work, here are the podcasts, here is the assignments. You can see everything that's going on inside of the classroom, essentially, because I've opened it all up. And so it was very transparent. So we had a parent, you know, that their child was saying, they're assigning me way too much work, blah, 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 right? So we just said, here it is. You tell me if you think this is not appropriate for 12th grade. And they emailed back and said, yeah, not so much, that's perfectly fine. We'll tell Joey that he just needs to get going. And so that allowed us to, you know, we had nothing to hide. Basically, when you say to the parent, here's everything we're doing, you know, it's hard to argue with it unless they truly have a, you know, a gripe.
Yeah,
So I've been doing this for 4 years now, and it just dawned on me 30 seconds ago that instead of sending a letter home, why don't I practice what I preach and make a screencast for the parents to watch?
That's what we did. We did that. We actually had our students do it.
I'm not too bright.
Was the teacher panel, are you taking on teacher panel?
We convinced
or
our
are you taking
students,
on
and then in the
a
English
link
department, we're
from
like,
where it says
we're
live stream?
creating videos for
Actually,
MLA.
in your Saturday morning
paragraphs. The
session,
most
what is
common
your
question we
box
get from
today?
parents is, what in the heck is this thing you're doing? Why don't we make a video? And so we have some really good, last year we had some TV kind of kids that love to make videos, and they made a video, and the students actually explained it, and we posted it on our website.
I am going to.
The other thing you can do is I would invite parents in.
I don't know why
I would
it's
say,
not
hey,
working.
just swing by, and a lot of them
I'm going to
would.
email you
They
the
would come
updated
in.
one.
That would be the selling point, is they would take the time to stop in,
Yeah,
even if it was
what's
for
your email
5
address?
minutes, just to see that their student was involved in learning.
Okay, we have a
We're
question from over
take
here.
another question here. I promised him he could go next. But that's okay.
Park?
Hang on just a second.
P-
Real quick,
okay,
before we move
P-A-R-K.
on, if you go to the Ning and search for letter,
Okay.
L-E-T-T-E-R, the parent letter that John and I have sent home is on there. If you want some ideas of here's what we tell the parents. Again, most of them don't read it; they just sign the paper and send it back anyhow. Okay. So we have the same
I just sent you the updated Google Doc.
But it's there.
It
You
has-
take it, use it. If it's not there, Brett will post it later. Because he
Aaron,
emailed me about it
let's
last
get a question here, and I will get him next.
Okay, perfect.
in relation to the flipped mastery, and just the mastery model, especially where just quizzes and tests and assessments are the points or the grade, when does it become a seat time issue where a student might not even have to be there much of the time, other than maybe labs and things like that, if they can get it without even being there, they have to be there.
I'll tell you, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this is the whole idea of, I'm a science geek, okay? So when we're talking about labs and things like that, there's constants and there's variables. The way things are set up right now, time is constant and learning is the variable. All the kids are sitting in the seats for the exact same amount of time regardless of how much they get out of class. What I love about the flipped mastery issue is that you're able to make learning the constant and time the variable. So if a kid can learn at a certain pace, go ahead. And being from Michigan, we have our seat time waivers and things like that, but I really think that whole idea is starting to change. That if, at least in our state, the discussion is happening at some of the higher levels that if a kid can show that they understand it, let them go. Let them move on. Let them do all that. And it's going to be a while before that's common. But I think what we're doing as teachers is as we're able to show that we can help our kids learn at their own pace during a 7:30 to 2:30 schedule, we're going to be in much better shape later on a few years down the line when that becomes more common, where maybe a kid doesn't need to come to school in order to show that they learn. Maybe a kid doesn't need to, or maybe they need to come every once in a while. I don't think there's a solid answer for this right now in the current system that we have, but if you've ever read Outliers, you guys read that, and the 10,000 hours of experience, I think a lot of that is what's happening right now, that the teachers that are getting used to being able to let kids learn at their own pace are going to be in much better shape in the future when that's more common.
I was kind of like John when I first started this, very type A, like you have to do this now, but as I went through the year, I became more like Aaron, because I realized that if a student got it in my class, they understood the chemistry, could do it at home, and they were working on history or economics or something else that they just needed time to work on, I realized that kid got to go to sleep 2 hours earlier because they could work on something else in my classroom. And so people would say, your class is like a study hall. And well, yes and no. I don't necessarily care where they learn the chemistry, they're still learning it. Who am I to dictate if they learn it at home or if they learn it in school? And so that's a really big switch that I made mentally that I think was one of the more powerful things about my classroom. And the other thing, I didn't care if they knew a teacher had a planning period during my chemistry class and they needed help with that content. As long as they were meeting my requirements, I'm not the one to judge where they do their other work, and especially living in a very school-driven society where kids are staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning or waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning to do their homework. The more that I can fight that by letting someone do their English homework in my class, I'm going to stand back and let them do what they need to do. So,
just real quick, in my view, it's just not all about the content, and I think it is important for kids to come to school most of the time to argue with other people, to discuss their ideas, to disagree on things, learn how to work out their differences, become part of a team, understand interpersonal dynamics, see how other people behave and act in the real world and how to deal with them. So I think that we can't miss that important human skill of personal interaction, and I think class is where a lot of that goes on.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Phil. I teach at the university level, and even when internet stuff first started, professors would just post their notes online. In college, they usually don't take attendance, and so people want to go to class. And you cannot learn from notes, just like you can't learn everything just from video. And so, I think. And so a number of college professors now, and they're loving it because literally no one goes to their classes. And so they're just like, all right. They post their lectures online in video and no one goes. And the students, maybe, they're learning enough to take the test, but they're not learning, you know, in a constructivist way, inquiry-based way. They're not learning cooperative learning. They're not learning the deep subject matter. They're not forming their own ideas. They're not, you know, doing peer tutoring. They're missing out on all that. So I think we really need to make sure that we make it so that you want to come to class. You know, there's going to be very rich instruction in class so that you're really going to need to go. And yeah, there might be some students that, you know, and probably, you know, the fact that like, it can open it up that, you know, students can maybe do band or sports without being like, oh my God, I'm going to fall behind. And I mean, it can help with that, but I think you need to make the class very
One more thing, just briefly, but to me, the whole advantage of flipping the class was what I could do in the classroom now. And it was how I can utilize that class time the best. And I just thought that taking the lecture out allowed me to do other things in class to help those students. And so if they wouldn't have come to class, I would have missed out on the whole point of what I was trying to achieve.
Can I just make a comment real quick about this? I was just curious, well, instead of just moving that kid along and that has mastered this concept of this unit to the next unit, why not hold them here for a minute or two and say, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to differentiate for you so that you can really go into a much deeper sense
so
of that concept.
Right, so the comment here is, instead of just pushing the kid through onto the next thing, if they're moving at a quicker pace, why not hit the brakes for them, have them dig deeper into what you've been teaching them, and that's I think a very perfectly legitimate way of dealing with this, because then you are truly differentiating for that student and making them dig deeper, really challenging them and giving them the education that's most appropriate to them. And then that really leads into the student created content that I think, I know John and I, that's something we do not do well, is giving the students the reins to say, take this and run with it. And that's something that we're getting there. We're not there yet. Again, we don't have all the answers. That's why we brought them in, because they do. So yeah, but absolutely.
I think another way that you could do that same thing is if you let them go at their own pace through the thing, and then when they got done, you let them go back and do like the senior project that child did, where they go for their passion. They've seen everything all the way through now. They've completed everything. Now I can take the time, instead of doing what you want me to do in this session, I can finish it and now do what I want to do, extend it on. And so it's like we've said the whole time, it's not cookie cutter. It's what fits in your class, in your way, and there's tons of ways to do it.
Good. Let's go ahead and move on to your question here.
For those of you guys who do teach on a mastery model, what advice would you give to, what I'm kind of wondering is, what in your perspective is the biggest pitfall to avoid for a teacher who's looking to move to that model of teaching?
The number one is communication to students and communication to parents and communication with administrators. Make sure everybody knows what you're doing and knows how it works, and that you're very clear about that, because there will be lots of confusion. It was the last week of April, and our principal was still getting phone calls from parents. This year, what in the world is Mr. Sam's doing? His class is kind of weird. Why doesn't he grade like the rest of the teachers? And so I need to do a better job of that, apparently.
One of the things I had that happened with my class, and it's following a little bit about what Brian was saying, was I gave so much flexibility in my class because of the pacing. It was like you could do whatever pace you wanted to do, that my class literally, of course, for about the first month or two, the kids were gung-ho and were with the program and doing it, but as a teenage mind will all of a sudden do, they will figure out ways that they can manipulate the system. And my class very quickly turned into a study hall class. With groups of kids. They would say, they're sitting at home, it's 6 or 7, hey, I have a history test tomorrow that's going to kill me. Oh, you know what, I don't feel like studying for tonight. I'll just do that in Mr. Wiley's chemistry class tomorrow. And so they started shifting away from doing the chemistry work, which again, I'm like Brian in that I would like the flexibility. I kind of don't care when they did it, So I didn't have that, but what I found out was the kids didn't quite jump on board with that, and they would start falling behind in my chemistry class. So what I ended up doing is I had to structure it a little bit more tightly to at least give them deadlines. Perhaps saying, you know, this unit has to be completed within the next 3 weeks. I mean, I would give the flexibility that I knew that the slower students would be able to do it in that time frame, but I gave them a little bit more restrictive time frame to do that. And the feedback that I actually got from the kids at the end of the school year when I asked them about that was they liked that. They actually liked having me give them a deadline because they felt like when it was just left up to them, they weren't mature enough at that point, they were 10th graders, to be able to figure out how to pace themselves and to have that self-discipline that they have to have. That wasn't for every kid. I had kids that moved along just as fast, but those are the really highly motivated, the smaller percentage. But that was one of the things I had as a problem that I had during the early part of the school year.
Never use the phrase self-paced. Self-paced to many students means no pace. And I'm really not even kidding about that. It's not self-paced. Train them that it's mastery of content, and that when you give a deadline, this is telling you, you know, I know it takes this much time to get through the year, and if you are behind at this point, you will be further behind, and then just bother the students that are behind. Call home, talk to the principals, talk to the counselors, get them out of their study halls, hassle them to stay caught up, because the kids that fall behind are the ones that are going to make you just nuts.
I think that's great advice because a lot of kids think self-paced means go as slow as I can and get away with it, for sure. So I'm going to do that different. I'd like maybe flex-paced. That might be a word. But, you know, the lesson I think I took home from last year that has changed, I think was a mistake, and I'm going to change what I do next year is I kind of got this idea from Deb is I'm going to spend the first month all working together. The whole class is going to go together, and they're going to be trained in how to succeed in this system. Last year I went 0 to 60, you know, boom, right off the bat, full bore, mastery, self-paced, unfortunately. So a whole month of the next school years, we're all going to go together. There's going to be a lot of training and explaining to students how to succeed with this model, and I think that's going to make a big difference for me next year.
Yeah, I want to kind of echo what Brett said. He and I and the NAIC were kind of going through this at the same time. There was a lot of conversation back and forth. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I communicated too well when I meant like a kid could work at their own pace. I would jump on them if they started missing deadlines, and I had a whole system for tracking. If they didn't turn work in for a week, man, the hammer came down, and they knew I was going to come down. The biggest thing that I took away is that you are more accountable, or you need to be more accountable under this system because it's so subjective in a sense, because you know your students. You really have to have documentation, and you really have to be able to back up why a student got the grade they did, not necessarily on the summative portion, but on everything else that they're doing. And if you cannot look into your administrator's eyes or to a parent's eyes and say, your student or this student did this because X, Y, Z, then you're again, falling back into bad teaching and not really being able to back up why the student is where they are at that moment. And it's kind of the double-edged sword of mastery. It's beautiful because we can work with kids at their pace, but at the same time, it's very easy to just sit back and say, yeah, they pretty much got it, and just check them off for the sake of checking them off. And that is probably the axe, you know, on your neck all year. And I really started to feel it as the year went, and as parents would start to say, okay, what's going on? But yeah, man, that's what really pushed me to make sure I was still accountable to parents because I could feel the tension. Scary.
Okay, right here, back here. Maybe we should get one online. I bet there's online.
I heard a number of people talk about the level that you have to be as an educator and what it requires to work in the system. And you've obviously put together some incredible people on this panel. What about those new teachers? You bring a person right out of college that comes in, has no experience. How are they going to handle learning all that you brought to the table when you started flipping?
It has to be collaborative. I guess last year was my second year ever in a subject I didn't major in. I was a biology major in college. I graduated in December of 2008, got a job in August of 2009. taught for a year lecturing, and then I switched to mastery. And the only way I was able to get through it is because I had connection with John, Aaron, and all these, I didn't know everyone up here, but people like Dan who are willing to speak up and say, hey, this is a good idea, maybe you should try this. You cannot do this in a box. You must connect with people, and that's why this is so great, because there's, 135 some people here. Most of us are science teachers, which is great. April's an English teacher. I found a social studies teacher on Twitter today. I'll tweet their name out again if you're social studies. But you have to be willing to take advice, you have to be willing to take criticism, and you have to be willing to not do it on your own. But yeah, and again, if you're thinking about doing this, and if you get a year under your belt, start mentoring people. Step out in that way too. Come back to the conference, even as an attendee, and say, hey, I was here last year, this is my input, I'm willing to network with you. But it does take a lot of leadership, and it takes people like you all who are willing to try something new, to step out and do this. And that's really where the change is going to be in the next 2, 3, 4 years, as it starts to gain more and more popularity. We need leaders who are willing to step up, and that's a big burden. But it's something that is going to be huge.
I want to add on to what you said, Brian. I'm fortunate in that I was the department chair and I started my high school, and so I kind of brainwashed people as they came on. It was a good brainwash, but it is definitely collaborative, and we hire people right out of college, student teach at our school, they come up, and actually once they get through a little bit of the bumpiness, if you will, they're all hardcore sold. They would not go back to where they are, but I would definitely concur. I mean, without each other and being able to bounce ideas off each other and to support each other. And administration, that's a huge thing. You have to have support from your administration. We did. He just kind of said, whatever, April, you're strange. We know that, just do whatever you want to do. And so I did.
And I would think one little thing is that it's almost, with any new teacher, you're gonna have to teach them how to teach, regardless. But it's almost harder with an older teacher that's done something for 20 years to say, okay, everything that you've done, let's kind of throw out, even though it's worked, and let's do this new thing. If you get a new teacher and you mentor them as a teacher, first of all, because it's important to be a good teacher. This isn't going to make you a good teacher. But you don't have to unlearn as much as you did before.
I would actually say, as the chief learner, I wrote a blog post. If you check my blog, blendedlearning.blogspot.com, I wrote an article, Why I'm No Longer a Classroom Teacher. And instead of a classroom teacher, I'm the chief learner, right? It's about learning, not about teaching. Schools. Anyways. So, any questions from online?
Yes.
Okay, fire away.
I have to go back and find them now. Hang on.
Working back there.
In the meantime, Jerry will
Kind
sing
of.
us a little song.
Well, can I add one more caveat to that? Can I wanted to talk about. Hey, Jerry. Jerry, can I add one more caveat to the new teacher thing, real quick? I'm just going to add one more thought. I'm sorry. I love your voice, though. It's just something that I thought of real quick. I did go through student teaching with a more traditional, quote-unquote, student teaching, where I did take days where I taught a lesson to a group. I still really value that. So if you're a student teacher mentor, you still have to give them that experience. I would not take a fresh 22-year-old college student and throw them into this mastery just like you wouldn't take a high schooler and throw them into this. I mean, there are some really, really good things, but there were days where I would have to stand up and teach my class. And if I didn't know how I did that through student teaching, I probably would have died. So please, it's again, you have to find that balance and how far you want to throw them in. Definitely give them the experience, definitely push them, but still remember that they are very fresh, and the way they have learned in college, the way I learned in college was stand and deliver. And that's something that still needs to be fostered.
I just wanted to talk briefly about we talk about the name.
Sorry, guys.
People sort of like, what the hell is the name? It's like the board. If you have a question, ask the name. The name is the social network site that we've set up. It's if you just Google podcasting name or flipped classroom, it'll pop up. Or if you want the actual address, it's podcasting.name.com. the fin on your water bottle clips there. That's really cool. But it's working really well. I mean, it's at the point where conversations are constantly going, and if you have, you know, I was really happy that someone posted something like, you know, the audio's cutting out on Camtasia when I do this and try to save. And within 24 hours, 2 or 3 people got on and be like, oh, I have the same problem. I found that my JavaScript enabler 3 dot was not on, and I turned that off, and now everything works. And I mean, that's great. And so it's almost becoming like a tech support. It's got great pedagogy type, you know, if you ask about like, you know, I want to do the mastery, but I'm not sure should I pace it by the month or by the week. And boom, you'll get all these wonderful, rich responses. And the other point on that is, you know, be a good steward of the thing. If it helps you out and you go on and see like, oh, I can answer that or I can comment on that, you know, be a good steward and put your 2 cents in it. I think it continues to grow and it's going to be a really good resource for all.
Sarah, what do we got?
All right, since students are taking tests online, do you have any tips for preventing internet cheating, like using Google?
Let me throw this back out, and I've said this before in various venues. If your tests were open internet, how would you write your test differently? And I think that's a big question we all need to chew on. Given the prevalence of, and just the availability of information just at our fingertips. I mean, Sarah and I, yesterday, we were trying to find the closest Best Buy for someone here, and we both whipped out our phones. I'm talking into my Google thing, she's banging it out on her iPhone. We're having a race to see who could get the address for the closest Best Buy. And within seconds, we had an address and directions for this participant. But if a kid can get access to information that quickly for something that you're assessing them on, think about Bloom, right? Where are you assessing them? If they can get it like that, you're probably down here. You need to be really getting your kids up here. But you can't get to level 4 in Bloom without 1, 2, and 3. So how are you going to get them 1, 2, and 3? Do you need to do a formal assessment on that or not? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But really think about what you're assessing your students on. And if it was open internet, how would you write it different? Okay, so that's a completely different answer, a completely different question to the question that was asked. So, preventing internet cheating. I have a testing station in my room where I can see all their screens. Most of their screens. There's still problems. I discovered some things yesterday during our student panel that I was unaware of. I'll be making modifications to deal with that. So, you know, but some kids do take them on their iPods. I would say half of my kids take them on an iPod, iPhone, Android. I need to have a good spot where I can kind of monitor that a little bit better. So I don't have a really good answer other than make sure you can see what they're doing and you know who's taking a test and you have a spot where you can kind of keep an eye on them. Anybody else have any other information?
Our tests were actually open internet, and the first time they took them, they were like, this is going to be great. I don't have to do anything. I can get on the internet and do whatever I want. Second time, right after they took it, they were like, oh my. It's a lot more difficult because you're not going to ask me to define XYZ. You're actually going to tell me to apply XYZ. And so it doesn't matter if I can look up what that means. I have to know how it relates to something else. And so the open internet for the kids first sounded really cool, and then they're like, yeah, it's a lot more work.
Well, last year was the first year of doing any sort of online quizzing. A couple of things, and I'm sure some dishonesty took place. Some it is open, they could take the quizzes at home if they wanted to. Many kids took them in school as well, so the ones that were in class, I think were pretty honest. Some of the ones at home possibly weren't. But one thing is that not everything that I have is online. I have a test at the end which is on paper in my room, which is multiple choice, constructive response, explain what you're thinking here. And there were instances where kids did really well on the quizzes and didn't do so well on that final summative test. And they can't go on, they can't get past it until they do so well also on that written test at the end. So that's kind of like a little check and balance system that you can build in. So even if cheating does go on, you eventually discover it, and so do they. Gosh, there's really no way we can actually know some of this stuff. And eventually, as the year goes on, you know, a smart person will learn that it makes more sense to actually learn the stuff and pass that test than it does to not learn the stuff and get hassled about why you can't pass the final have a perfect system, I don't have all the answers, but having that written test is one sort of check that prevents somebody from cheating all the way through.
One other more practical thing, when we put our tests online on Moodle, John and I, we lock down the IP address where you have to be in the school to take it. You have to have a school IP address. You can't take it at home. And we also put them behind a password where John and I actually have to physically type in the password for the student to activate that test. So they can't just be down in the library overtly taking it with their friend, giving them all the answers. They have to. I know who's taking the test because I type it in. Now, apparently yesterday I found out that some kid will hand the laptop to another kid to have them take it after I've typed it in. So I need to be more conscious of who have I given that password to, not just be working with another kid, typing it in over here, and not even looking who I just give the password to. So.
How about another question from online?
Sorry, hang on. April's got one more coming.
I was going to say, in English, so we're a little different breed, but and there are some Blooms, level 1, level 2, that we have to get through for our state testing. And before we had Moodle, we used classmarker.com. If you haven't used it, it's a free testing site if you don't have Moodle. And our kids did all of our tests at home, and we were worried about the same thing for cheating, for vocabulary tests. And so we decided we timed it. So we were 20 questions, you had 10 minutes. And there were 15 iterations of that test. So the kids could even get online in the amount of time and talk to each other. You couldn't pause the test. It was a starting and stopping. So I don't know if that really curbed any of it, but Phil said at the end, we had a paper-based cumulative. So they didn't do it along the way. They were ultimately penalizing themselves.
Sarah, anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, from the audience? Okay, a couple over here.
We call John Ricky Lake, running through the audience past the microphone.
If you had to choose to start with, flip or mastery, to start, what would you start with?
I chose flip. And the reason is because it fit better into economics than mastery would, in my opinion. So it was based on subject level.
I also went flipped first, and because I was really working on a culture in my school of changing that, and I felt that it was going to be a lot better to kind of go gradually and potty train my kids and parents and things like that on how to do this than to jump full. And now I know other people here have done it successfully, jump right into mastery, but at least in my experience, I did flip first.
This past year, we had 40 teachers, math and science, middle school and high school. And we presented all of this over the course of the summer. All of the video training, all of the ideas of mastery, Web 2.0 tools, 21st century learning, all of that. And all of the teachers bought in to mastery. They all understand that it's about learning and that it's not about penalizing students for not learning in the amount of time that was prescribed. So if I had to pick, this is just a personal thing, if I had to pick one over the other, I would pick mastery. Because with mastery, I feel like I'm assuring that my students are learning the content. Now, if you're going to do mastery, how do you pace your students for that? And I think without flipping as well, it becomes significantly more difficult. But we had math teachers this year that did it. They did it very, very successfully, although they're flipping now this next year. But if I had to pick, I'd pick mastery first.
Yeah, I'm a bad example. I did both, in the same year. If I had to go back and pick a different way to do it, I would probably go with that, say that mastery to me was the more important component of it, but I don't know how I would have done it without the flipping. But in my scenario, I had a very open administration. I could do whatever I wanted. I was accountable to them, but he let me act and make professional decisions. And that was very powerful and enabling for me. And I also had smaller classes. So if you've got 120, 130 kids, I would say don't just dive in. It was fun, but it was also very, 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 very hard.
about 8 years ago, this is before I got to Woodland Park, I tried to do some mastery things in my class. The reason for that is the school I taught at, the students wanted to take AP chemistry before they took regular chemistry, and any of you who teach that know that that is nearly impossible, but that was the culture in the school. So I had 98 kids, 2 of whom had taken chemistry before AP chemistry, and most of them were all sophomores. So I had sophomores in AP chemistry taking chemistry for the first time. So they couldn't write a formula for a compound, they couldn't balance equations, so all that really basic fundamental chemistry stuff that they need to have coming in, I just set up a mastery system. I said, all right, you have to prove to me, you got to get a 90% or better on all 10 of these quizzes. Guess what I had? I had a pile of paper that I had to grade all the time because kids were constantly taking these quizzes. I only had a couple versions of these quizzes, so the kids were sharing their answers. So I had cheating, I had piles of paper I had to get through. I got overwhelmed and I struggled. So I tried the mastery first, but now in retrospect, it's like, oh man, if I had videos to teach them how to do that, and I was able to have all those quizzes done electronically, that would have solved that problem. I could have dealt with that, but I just didn't have the technology at my disposal at that point. I didn't have the concept of the flipped classroom, in my brain at that point. And I'm looking back that I wanted mastery, but flipping my classroom makes mastery possible, just like something said.
One thing that I'd like to add is you really need to think about your personal situation. I mean, when I started doing this, my wife and I, we had 3 kids under the age of 5. I coached cross-country, basketball, and track. I was very sleep deprived and things like that. And so you do have a life outside of school. You are a person as well as a teacher. And I can tell that we have amazing teachers in this group, but at the same time, don't let that affect your life outside. So that, for me personally, that was a big influence on just how much I was able to jump in.
Yeah, I tweeted last night, baby steps. Granted, I said mastery first, flipping makes that easier, but I would not encourage you to go all in. Many of us were ridiculously sleep deprived as we did this. So baby steps are a good thing.
That was a perfect setup for what I was going to say. I'm a radical pragmatist. And so they've asked me to teach either college algebra or calculus at the university in the fall. And so what I thought was like, okay, anything that I do where I used to get up in front of the class and not really expect much student interaction, I'm going to put on a podcast and do that. And anything that I used to give as homework where they would come to class and I knew they had questions about it, or they would be like, we do not understand that at all. Those are going to become class activities. Simple as that. That's what I'm going to do. That's my radical practice of the flipped classroom.
Okay, over here.
Yeah, I was questioning if I did the quizzes and allowed them to retake them, multiple times, but yet on the test, just allow them to take the test once. Do any of you do that?
Yeah, that's what we do in chemistry.
Do what works. Don't use the tool for the sake of using the tool. Use the tool because it's the right one for the job. What else? Way in the back there. Sorry, I can't see.
Yeah, you might want to ask questions to come to me at some point.
I want to start doing a flipped class this year, and I want to know, how did you get students to volunteer, or did you just pick a class and say, this is what you're going to do? How do you start getting those kids in?
Us personally, we picked a class and said this is what we were going to do. And the thing for me in picking a class and saying this is what we were going to do is I wasn't taking away anything that I had done before. I was actually having the ability to add more. So at no point did I feel like I was shortchanging these kids. I thought, if anything, I'm giving these kids more than what they were getting before. So that was the way I did it.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I came in day 1 to my general chemistry and I said, here's what we're doing. But along with that, I did not act as a dictator. After every unit, I said, okay, what worked, what didn't work? And kids said, Mr. Bennett, this sucked. Or Mr. Bennett, hey, that was great, can we do that again? And I probably went through 4 or 5 versions of the flipped, class. We talk about it like it's this one idea, but it's a philosophical idea, not a methodology idea. And so because they knew I was going to take that feedback, and I pestered them for feedback, I mean, even on an assignment or a lab, I said, did you like this? They would say, no. Or they say, yeah, it wasn't bad, but you could do this. And then I would tweak it for the next unit, and they were much, much more willing to continue going along with this crazy idea because they understood and they knew that I was not going to come down and just give it to them based on what I was feeling that day. I was willing to adapt and change.
That was my favorite part of the flip, was the immediate feedback of how good a teacher I was or how good a lead learner I was at that time. Because instead of having to wait for the summative assessment to say, I didn't teach that well, I knew immediately the next day I didn't teach that well, and I could reteach it, and then I could go back and change it. And so if you're not willing to evaluate your process along the way, in my opinion, you're not going to be successful in this model.
I have a question back here.
I teach in a school where there are 4 of us that teach chemistry. And so if I choose, and I'm strongly leaning in that direction, to flip my chemistry classroom, at the semester break, students are rearranged. So some of the students who may have flipped with me are now back in a traditional classroom. Is that going to be a hindrance to them, or?
Yep.
The first year that we did this, I had that exact scenario because I was the only one that was flipping. And at semester time, let's upset the apple cart, and whoever you get second semester, you get. And I'll be brutally honest. By and large, the students that left the flipped classroom wanted to come back, but there are students that do not like this method and would prefer a traditional classroom setting. And the 2 groups of students that I see that don't function particularly well in this are the really, really bright students who want to show everybody what they know every day. They don't get that opportunity to answer every question anymore. Now, I don't worry about them because they're fine. They get through the material, they're good to go. And then the student who really, really doesn't want to work would just prefer to sit in the back of the classroom and just get through the day and is upset when you make them retake and relearn. That student would prefer to go back to the traditional classroom because they're not bothered so much.
I would think that it depends a lot on whether you're going mastery. If you went mastery, it would seem it would be much more difficult to switch at semester than in my case where I wasn't doing mastery. It would have been easier for my kids. So.
My first thought is I'm always trying to push something, and whether that's a flaw or a good thing. I can't comment on it. But my first thought when you said that was, well, we're always asking the question, how do we get administrators to buy into this? Because there's a lot of pressure in some schools. And again, I was very fortunate. My principal said, yeah, just do it. I would push this and say, okay, would you be willing to use my class as a pilot and bump the other 3 around, but please just let me keep my kids and then we'll compare. And whichever one works better, we'll go with that. I'm willing to take the heat if it doesn't work. And that's something that, again, you need to be willing to step out as a leader and really push for in your school if you believe it that much. I do. That's something that I would do. I would fight for it. I would say, please, put me out on the side. Put a big old bullseye on my chest and I'll prove that it works. I'll take that proof. So I have to explain something for those of you who saw me on my phone, okay? I wasn't being rude, but Brian said something that really resonated with me, and I was like, I have to tweet that out. Oh my God. Okay? And I asked him, like, is it okay if I tweet during this? So it was just the whole idea of this flipped mastery as ideology rather than methodology. That explained everything that I've learned in the past 5 days. Now back on what we were talking about, at the beginning of this year I was in the classroom. In February I moved over to my new position as educational technology consultant. So my class was flipped mastery. My kids,
I had to train them on things, but when I left, the teacher that replaced me went back to a very traditional model. And it makes me a little bit sad, it also makes me a little bit happy at the same time, but as I go and talk to these kids afterwards, they said, you know what, Mr. Spencer, for as much as we complained about it, we really liked how we were able to do that. And that made me feel wonderful because of all the time and energy that I put into it. I could tell that even if they were crying about having to demonstrate that they understood or if something wasn't going right, they still appreciated that freedom to be able to choose how they learn.
Well, I think we need to wrap this up. Man, you guys are just rock stars, I tell you. Let's give a round of applause to our teachers.
So the next thing we're going to do, and again, instead of doing the big, large group, just shotgun you all with a bunch of Camtasia stuff, we're going to break you up into kind of where you are, meet you where you're at in terms of your abilities with Camtasia for Mac or PC. Same rooms you were in yesterday, but if you want to change levels up or down, feel free to do that. If you are a multi-platform person and want to experiment on a PC instead of a Mac or a Mac instead of a PC, do that. So, yes, Dave.
One thing I'd like to add to that, if you are advanced and you feel like you might be better suited just helping out, feel free to jump into one of the other classrooms. What we're planning on doing in these are a lot more hands-on, so we can have advanced people to help out and just walk you through the process.
Yeah, my group, I'm the advanced teacher, if you will. We would love to see you guys just go break out and just help other people. But if you want to stay in the room and just get help with me, that's great too. Online people, Troy's going to, hope it's all going to work. Hopefully the Adobe Connect server is back up. He's going to work with you individually like he did yesterday. If it's via Ustream, we'll figure that out for you. Or live stream, we'll figure that out.
We've got 10 minutes to figure out a solution. So we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, watch the emails.
All right, thanks.
That's fine.